Hi everybody, this is Dr. Pola Rosen. I'm the publisher of Education Update, and I'm honored to be here today with Mr. Seymour Fliegel. May I call you Cy?
Of course.
And he is the President and Gilder Senior Fellow of the Center for Educational Innovation and Public Education Association. We're going to call that today CEI-PEA. I was interested in your own personal trajectory, from teacher to principal to superintendent to CEI-PEA and even the White House.
Okay.
So you have a breadth and depth of experience that you bring to us that not too many people have. I wanted to ask you about one of the missions of CEI-PEA, and that is fostering the support and creation of new public schools. Can you expand on that a little bit?
But what we have been fortunate enough to do is to help some really outstanding schools get started. For example, the KIPP Academy. We made that happen with David Levin. And of course, I think there's over 100 KIPP academies across the country now. But that was a good school. And I think he's got around 5 now in New York City. So that KIPP Academy was one. Frederick Douglass was another. We convinced Lorraine Monroe at the time, who was retired. Coleman Gett and I took her out to Elaine's and we said, we want you to come back. We want you to create a new school. And she did, and that's how the Frederick Douglass Academy came about. So you got to find people, well actually the people find us, they come to us, and they say, we would like to create a school. And we help them create that school. We help them select the principal, we help them get staff, and we gave them guidance once the school opened. But the key always was selecting a really outstanding leader and principal. And that is true. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. The leadership of a school is the critical factor because the leader sets the culture of that school.
But what would you say would be some of the salient ingredients of their success?
That's a good question. I think it would also answer the question, what are the elements that make for a good school? Each of those people have a dream or a vision of what they wanted for a school. And they all had the ability to communicate that vision. Secondly, and I know you've heard this many times, expectations. How do you communicate high expectation? Of course, I've never met an educator who doesn't say, I'm for high expectations. That's not enough to say you're for high. How do you communicate it to teachers and to children? I say it's how you treat them. That is the message. That's the communication. So if you treat youngsters as thugs, they will be thugs. If you treat them as learners, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a school and I'd say to a kid, no, you have a job here. The kid said, what's my job? I said, you're a learner here. It was like a new idea for him. So that is a critical thing, and the way it's done is how you treat it, even for teachers. You want teachers to act like professionals? Treat them as professionals. We really don't treat teachers as professionals.
Well, that's another point. So it's the learners, that's one thing, and then treating the teachers as professionals. I just want to interject here that you just honored Joel Klein and Ann Tish at your most recent gala of CEI-PEA. And I will never forget something that Joel Klein said. He said, I went to school in the Bronx, and I am so grateful forever to my teachers for not lowering their expectations of what I could do. And it was because they had high expectations of me, even though it was an immigrant neighborhood and the kids didn't have the backgrounds that many others have in private schools. It was the way that I was treated that made me into the kind of individual I am today. And that's exactly what you're saying.
In the state of Florida, there was a law saying you could not use IQs for placement, for creating a program and so on. And in this Florida school, as there is in every school, there was that class that no matter what it was, they were in trouble. They were a problem. And the principal called down, Mrs. Dougherty, I remember it so well, said, I want you to take over that class. And she knew what he was talking about. They had already had 2 teachers. And she was an experienced teacher. She went up there, and she was having difficulty. So she went down to the principal's office to talk to him about it. He was not in his office. So she walked in, and she took a look at the records of the kids. And she was astonished. She looked at the record, and she saw, next to the names, numbers from 127 to 157. And she went back to that class and says, you know, you're the smartest class in this school. You're most probably the smartest class in the district. Things are going to change here because you have the potential to be the most outstanding class. And in 2 months they were. And the principal called her down and says, Dougherty, what did you do? And she was an honest woman. She said, well, I'm sorry, you weren't here. I looked, I saw their IQs. I told them how smart they are, and I treated them that way. I hope you're not angry. He says, no. And as she was leaving, he said, by the way, Mr. Dougherty, the numbers you saw were their locker numbers. So you begin to understand it's how you treat people that determines how they behave. So that's what I mean by expectations. So then what's the next thing? Well, good leaders are willing to share leadership, what we now call distributive leadership. But actually what it is you're willing to let others take responsible roles in a school. Principals are willing to be accountable if they have decision-making powers. Look, if you don't have people accountable, then how do things change?
As part of your mission statement, and it was an interesting statement I came across, 34% of New York City high school students are directly entering the workforce rather than going to college. And I wondered if you had some advice or some insight to give us about the kinds of jobs we should be preparing them for.
Well,
and I do go way back to the School of Aeronautics, which I think is still there in Queens, and the Aviation High School, and then there was the Automotive High School in Brooklyn. I think it's still around. But the vocational education scene has really diminished and has been altered enormously.
We have no real tech schools, because vocational now is a no-no word, because it ended up being dumping around for kids.
Should we bring it back though?
Yes, we need a program of tech schools that includes, you can go to college, that's why I mentioned New York Tech. At New York Tech, you learn a trade, you learn a field, and you get, after 2 years, you get an associate degree. If you want to pursue it further, you get a bachelor degree. The whole idea in this country, by the way, which is a nice idea, that you should never cut off a youngster at an age who has potential, but it hasn't been developed. So if we set up a technical school system that still allows youngsters who want to go on to college, you're no longer cutting short their possibilities, but you are providing jobs, and those will be well-paid jobs.
Absolutely.
They're not going to be like in a hedge fund, but the kid's going to make $90,000 and $100,000 a year working as an X-ray.
Now, I think you and I will agree, Cy, we've both been around the block here in education for a couple of years, that the single most important ingredient, in addition to having a great school leader and a motivator and a communicator, is the teacher.
Absolutely.
Okay. How do we prepare and keep the best teachers in the schools?
Well, there are 2 ways. There must be 8 ways, but the easiest way I know is we've got to elevate the profession of teaching so that our smartest students want to be teachers. Now, one of the positive signs, I think, has been Teach for America, because we're getting, I think 12% of the Yale graduating class applies to Teach for America. So, on the simplest way, we're getting smarter people to come into teaching. And I'm sure you're aware that in Finland, the #1 school system in the world, the top 10% college graduates go into teaching. So that's that's an easier way we could do it. But we have different values in our society.
Yes.
And everybody wants to be a hedge fund manager. So we've got to change how we train teachers. And the schools of education have to adapt to it. And I think somewhere along the line, and this is somewhat more controversial, it has to be easier to get teachers who are not really satisfactory out of this system in some honorable way. In other words, again, I understand, someone spends 5 years becoming a teacher, you say, oh, you're no good. The city or the state has to take some responsibility. They selected them. Look, how many jobs you have that you have to control 30, 32 kids? Very few. These are educated people. So we could put them in the library system, the transportation system, in the health system. But they should not be permitted to go on for 20 years. You know what they say? They say if a child has a great teacher for 2 years, that child will succeed. Just 2 years, consecutively. So picture what it's like if a child has an unsatisfactory teacher for 2 years. That kid is going nowhere. So it's too serious a thing. So we ought to be able to, in an honorable way, move those who are not successful out of the system. Get them jobs elsewhere, so you don't destroy a person's life.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Right.
I want to point out that we interviewed Dr. John King, the new commissioner of New York State.
He's a very good guy.
And he recalls his 4th grade teacher at a public school in Brooklyn as saving his life. And I know that I remember the name of every single teacher I had in elementary school. And I know that you do too, Si. The teachers that were outstanding or that were excellent, you will always remember their names. And that is, to me, more important than the paycheck even, but that's me.
In everybody's life, there has been a teacher. The sad part is that there's only been 1 or 2.
That's right.
That's the sad.
That's right, absolutely.
But you see, I think teachers don't realize how important they are.
Yeah, I just want to mention Arthur Levine, the former president of Teachers College, is a good guy and a good friend. He feels that the schools of education are failing us. They are not providing the proper education for the preparation of teachers. How do you feel about that? What should they be doing?
Well, there are a number of points of view on this. There isn't a core curriculum, actually, in the schools of education. So one, there has to be some core knowledge-based. That's what Hirsch is core knowledge. So that it can't all be just methods courses. So what are you teaching is very important. I like the idea of Teach for America. These kids have majored in some area. It could be English or history or chemistry or science. So they have a sense of confidence in what they're doing, and they know more. So that's what we need from the schools of education. It can't be just methodology.
But it seems to be one of the charges that's been leveled against Teach for America, I think it's Wendy Kopp has done a splendid job, is that the teachers don't stay very long.
Yes, but I think...
It's like King Henry VIII said to his wives, I won't keep you for long.
Long, okay. So let's take that. If we're right, and as I said earlier, young people today are going to have 4 or 5 careers. I'm willing to have people come in for 3, 4 years and teach. But what they're trying to do, I don't know how many now, but I remember 2 years ago, we had 50 Teach for America principals in New York City. So the idea is to keep them interested in education.
Yes.
Some go on boards of education and so on. But what's the retention rate of regular people? After 5 years, 50% are gone.
Last question.
Okay.
And this has to do with special education, which is very close to my heart. My training, my doctoral work was in special ed. So you have Project Hope. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Project Boost. Special ed was set up, hopefully, to serve children. Basically, it served adults. We set up a system. We had a system when we were in District 4. We called it Project Mainstream, where we took two teachers, a regular teacher and a special ed teacher. And we said, we want you to mainstream kids, because there are kids in special ed who could be mainstream.
Oh, of course.
Part of the day, for sure, right? And in return, what you should say to the teacher is, if you have a kid who's not special ed, but needs help, we'll be happy to work with them one-on-one, so that the teacher feels, oh, it's a wonderful program, now they give me a special ed kid to add to my 32 kids. No, we'll take out 2, 3 kids, and you take 1 or 2 of our kids. So they have to be mainstream, because what begins to happen is, I'm not talking about the severely handicapped kids. We lower the expectations of what they are. It is a tough problem, there's no question it's a tough problem. But there have to be opportunities for them to be integrated with other kids. And there are many ways you can do that, because they're not totally out of it, you know, that's not what it is. But there are a lot of kids, especially the kids who are in their course of behavior, there's not enough change taking place. So that it is really, once you're in, you're stuck. And once you're stuck, the expectations are low level.
Sorry, we spoke today about vision and about leadership.
Right.
And that's what you have. You have vision.
Well,
And you have leadership, and you're leading this great organization.
I have a good
and
job.
helping so many others out there in New York City.
Well, that's very kind.
And we thank you for that. Really.
Well, thank you for coming.